thank you everybody for attending the webinar, Virtual Meetup today. Actually, this is the second one we've done in 2 weeks. This is the second one, so it's pretty cool. That means there's a lot of exciting news coming out of Microsoft that we want to share with our customers, our audience, those people interested in Azure Stack HCI. Today, we're very happy to have another good topics to discuss, and very happy to have Kerim here talking about Azure Stack HCI single node support. It's an announcement that was announced, I think I built maybe 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of interest. So we want to take this time to share with you kind of what this technology is doing for Azure Stack HCI and really taking your questions. What makes the virtual meetup very cool and unique is that everybody here are someone that's interested in the technology and you want to learn more about it. And we want you to proactively and actively ask all the questions. We have Microsoft people here that can answer the question. We have DataON people here, and we have MVPs here that will to help answer the question. So please do make this interactive. Make sure that whatever question you have, feel free to ask us. There's never a bad question because we all have questions. So today we'll have Kerim go first, talk about a background about this technology of single node support. We'll have Henry, our lead PM, product manager, management lead, to kind of share with you what he has done with the single node in his lab. They will open up for questions and talk about some of the future roadmap that Microsoft's doing to make sure you guys are excited about the new prospect technology with Azure Stack HCI. So without further ado, Kerim, if you don't mind sharing some background, it's all yours.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Howard. So I'm happy to be here and talking about the Azure Stack HCI single node support. So I've been working on, I've been actually been in this team for over like 2 years now in the HCI team. But before I was in SCCM, and before that I was in again in System Center team, Virtual Machine Manager team. So what I'm planning to do today is to go over why we actually added the single node cluster support, right? Like what was the reason behind it, and to go over some, like some customer use cases that we've seen. And I have some comparison slides between multi-node and single node, so you know exactly like what a single node can do. And then I'm going to go over like some of the things that we did, like our documentation changes. Our catalog has improved to include single node, and then some important parts like for example monitoring and log analytics. And then go over some frequently asked questions. And if you have any questions, we will have some time for Q&A as well. So that's the plan. Okay, just to start, so why we added this support, and the main reason was because of the like the importance, like because the customer, everyone, from the customer's point of view, we see that they want to modernize their environment. They want to make sure that they have the HCI. They like the HCI model. They like the consistency of it, that it's like one single support agreement, one bill, and they like the OpEx model, operational expenditure model, and we see a huge demand from customers to add the support. And the main reason, if you dug into it, is because they want flexibility. They say that, okay, I can actually use my HCI in my data center, but I have all these branch offices, all these locations around the world that, or in my country, that I have these like small branch offices or retail locations, and I want to also modernize those environments. And how can I do that? Like, I actually, I can actually tolerate lower resiliency. Can I just, reduce my hardware and Azure costs? So that was the main driver.
And believe it or not, Kerim, we have a lot of customers asking that as well. Since the beginning, when we introduced Azure Stack HCI, when we talk to customer that has multiple construction website job sites, We see customers that has branch offices. They always ask the question, even when the Azure Stack was introduced, hey, what can I put Azure Stack HCI on a single node? So believe it or not, it's just not what you guys see. We're definitely seeing a request on our end from customer because there are definitely realistic use cases out there that they believe a single node would benefit.
Exactly. And that was the main driver, to be honest. And then we also saw a lot of competitors moving in this space too, and we wanted to have a competitive offering as well. And just to go over a little bit, like we mainly saw these in retail and manufacturing space, and there are like two main like customer use cases that we saw. One of them was like traditional VMs and traditional workloads, right? And these customers are usually retail, and they have these like thousands of locations, and they have usually like a SCCM-DP, a distribution point, or a DHCP server, or that kind of like a traditional workload, or they have like LOB apps. They usually have like 2 or 3 or 4 maybe VMs, and they want as cheap as possible. They want budget servers. They want to they want to have these in all of their locations, right? So this is like one customer scenario that we saw. Is this the one that you always you see mainly, Howard, as well?
Yeah, well, I think I think ease of deployment, also budget, because that multiple location are some of the drivers they see for sure, and the fact that I'm sure you'll get into it. The fact that it's really a hybrid infrastructure. You still have Azure there to help deliver a lot of services. So that entire model could fit and support a single node server.
Yeah, and if you tie this to what I was saying in the beginning, some of these customers, they have already HCI in their data center, but they're like, okay, I really like this model. I'm now getting one build from Azure and everything, but my locations, all my retail locations are like it's a different kind of model. So I want to have everything in one consistent like billing and consistent support, everything from Azure. So they really like that model. So that's the main customer use case. The other one is, and these customers, they actually moved to modernizing their apps. So they have containerized VMs and apps, and they're thinking about more on these like maybe AI ML kind of scenarios with SQL MI. Managed instance, and also they have maybe cameras that they want to control, and they want to do some like computations locally and then send it, that kind of like those kind of scenarios, right? So those customers are they kind of need larger hardware, maybe GPU support as well, and these customers but they are just saying, since I have so many of these locations, I actually want to go with single nodes, and I want to do like a component level resiliency is perfectly fine for me. That's basically what they're saying.
We have a question, Slavko. Go ahead.
So just a question. So with single node, we don't have high availability. So are they using the Azure Site Recovery, or they are not concerned about the high availability at all?
So it is definitely, ASR is definitely supported, and what these customers can, there are some of them, they actually don't care about, like they're okay with like lower resiliency, right? But there's a degree, right? And some of them are saying, okay, you know what, I'm taking my backups. Like I have some. I can restore if I can restore in a couple of days, it's fine. But maybe everything is in the cloud. I'm already sending it to the cloud, so the compute is not that important. But some of them, are also thinking about like ASR kind of site recovery kind of scenarios, which is already supported. But it may not be possible in some of these locations because some of these locations have really latency, like high latency, and maybe some of them are even like satellite connected, right? Because they are maybe petrol stations. So sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you need to go with like some like local, innovative ways. But
I know in the slides you have, a later slide you'll talk about kind of some of the requirement of what a single node different from a two node. So I think there you could address pretty much a lot of questions Swako has too.
Okay, and which is the next slide. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah, let's just move to that one. So in here, I'm, this is not the full list, but I wanted to, discuss add as many as possible. I have actually 2 of these. So, if you start from the deployment, today the deployment is actually in the 21H2 version of HCI. Windows Admin Center is not supported, but it's going to be supported in the future. So it's going to be, that's why I have it like a green check marks in here. And one thing that we are considering for the future version of Windows Admin Center is to have an express setup specific to single node. So this way, with a couple of clicks, you can actually be up and running. But that is not going to be in multi-node. That's why I have a red X in here. But we are actually thinking about these locations because when I mentioned like thousands of locations, it also needs to be easy to install these locations because they usually don't have, IT in those locations. So it can be expensive to send IT there or like a contractor there, right? So we are thinking about those kind of scenarios too. And the first start of this is going to be the express setup. It is also going to support the same thing as like multi-node, like zero-touch deployments and unattended deployments are going to be supported. The other important thing, and this was a design decision that we thought about when we were discussing when we were designing the single node, was that we wanted to be as similar as possible to multi-node, and that's why single node is actually a cluster. It's a failover cluster. It's a full SCD stack, software designed data center stack. So it has a hypervisor, it has a storage, S2D, it has networking. Everything is exactly like multi-node. It is a cluster, but just one node in it. So that way, if you want to expand it, it's easy because all you need to do is just add the node. And we're going to talk about expansion in the future in coming slides as well. And one thing that is different than multi-node is that these locations that the customers have, they are remote locations usually, right? So in those locations, in order to keep the uptime as much as possible, we basically went ahead and so you cannot actually have a hybrid storage configuration, meaning you cannot have 2 NVMe cache drives and let's say 4 capacity HDD drives, right? So it's all flat and all NVMe or all SSD is what a single node supports.
But the reality is that if you look at an edge, capacity is probably not a driver. So I don't think HDD is even necessary. Also, a lot of design we have, a lot of customers here, unless they have a lot of big terabytes of storage, flat SSD, flat NVMe design has been very, 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 very easy to deploy and very efficient. So I think this direction that you have is actually quite good, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when we had an early adopter program with a lot of customers, and none of them, and all of them actually said they were not thinking about like spinning drives in those locations anyway, because of the error rates and they didn't want to like those kind of because they're usually like under the desk. They're usually these are like tower. Some of them are tower and type devices with some dust, and it could be even grease. So that's why they want it as stable drive as possible. So that's why they were all fine with it as well. And so if you continue, it's all the things that you know and love in HCI, like native Azure Arc integration, using it from Azure portal, HCI Catalog, billing, registration, the cost, everything is exactly the same as multi-node. So if you continue, support, just like multi-node, it's through Azure. Connectivity, the same connectivity, you can actually disconnect it for 30 days, but it needs to be connected after that. It's the same. So one of the things in here, S2D storage space is directly supported, but in the fault domains, as you can imagine, since the fault domain cannot be a node because there's only one node, the fault domain, that's why it's always a physical disk, which is expected because then, but you can have two-way mirror, three-way mirror as well. So that's why I actually have physical disk in here. So it cannot be storage scale unit. And of course, if you have a host OS update and it requires a restart, then you have to consider that the VMs cannot live migrate to another node, so the VMs will be down too. So you have to take that into an account and make sure that you gracefully shut down everything before you restart the host, because the VMs are definitely going to have hard time downtime because it's a single node. And of course, since you don't have another node, you cannot do live migration. You cannot have affinity rules because it's a single node. So that's why they have X's in here. But everything else, just like Azure benefits, like the Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition is supported, just like in multi-node. Windows Server subscription, you can have it. SDN, Secure Core, GPU support, Site Recovery, we talked about it, all supported. The Stretch Cluster is not supported at the moment. Stretch Cluster is like one node on each side. That's basically not supported currently. AKS HCI is in preview. It will be supported in the summer, so they have to go through some tests in their test systems. That's why. But I have some customers using it, and I know you guys are using it too, Howard, and I think Henry has this in its test environment anyway. So I know that it works, but we just have to officially support it. We have to go through our test configurations. So that's why it's in preview right now.
I love Stretch Cluster, but I rather Stretch Cluster gets more robust with a 2-node or 3 nodes. Let's let Ernie test it first. Make sure he finds all the bugs first before we get to the single node stretch, because
yeah, exactly.
Ernie is a bug finder. I think he breaks the record at how many bugs he finds on Microsoft. So
cool.
we'll go from there.
We don't talk about that in front of Microsoft. Not like it's not like Kerim or those guys. They want to throw a brick at my face sometimes.
Okay.
Okay. So, any questions up to this point before I move on? Let me pause here for a second. Sorry, I went through COVID. This is my second week, so sorry about my voice.
You look fine. So I just want to make sure that the last 3 pieces really is saying that whatever moving forward, all the Azure feature, all the services that we talk about with Azure Stack HCI, single node will also support. That's really the message,
exactly.
Right? So as you continue to push services down with Arc, with AVD, with AKS, with Manage, all that slowly will trigger down as more feature becomes available. Can I use that as a high-level message?
That is exactly the high-level message, and we are not going to do anything specific for any feature not to support single node or anything like that.
Okay.
That's the plan. So if you've been to HCI Catalog lately, you might have noticed this new filter that we added, nodes per cluster. And if you select like 1 to 4, you can see all the configurations that actually supports single node. And currently we have 6 OEMs, of course DataON is included, and 39 systems and 144 configurations that already support single node, and this increases every day. And we also, like, if you click on one of these systems, you can actually see, like which configuration of the system. Like for example, if you click on this one, you can actually see like which configuration of this system has single node support. In DataON's case, like you guys have like flat configuration anyway, but like if you click on anything else that has like a hybrid configuration, those are actually marked as not supported on that particular configuration is not supported. But
sorry, I have a dumb question. This is actually really dumb. I should know this. Single node is GA or preview?
It's GA.
GA. So you're saying to me, that's why it's dumb, because all my stuff is on there already. A customer could come, anybody here could come here and says, Howard, design me a single node. I'm ready to deploy, and Microsoft's going to support that across the board.
Exactly.
Wow. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. I guess it's only 2 weeks ago, and that's why it's like I just think I could still a couple more weeks before it actually GA. So I could start officially, because it has to be a Microsoft supported feature before I can sell it, but it is officially, everything's done.
It is 100% supported.
Got it. Thank you. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, when you have single node, right, and some of these things become like much more important, right? Like for example, monitoring, because you have a single node. You have to know, like like these are all optional features in HCI, like monitoring and log analytics. But with single node, it is really important that you actually have proactively get insights, and you need to make sure that it's healthy. So I highly recommend the log analytics and monitoring to be configured for single node clusters. So that's why I wanted to have this slide in here. And we have we actually just recently announced, like some improvements to this area. If you go to our announcements in our Azure blog, you can see that. And it is, you actually have a multi-server view like this, or you can have a single server view as well in our monitoring solution. To move on to documentation, we also created a couple of articles, and one of them was this one, using a single server and then deploying single server. Deployment is, I'm actually going to go through it. I have like some, bullets coming, but it is very simple. You actually go through, in PowerShell. And in our documentation, what we did was we didn't copy everything from the deployment, because we had a really detailed deployment article already. So we are basically linking to that. We are giving some examples like here, and also linking to the larger article if you have like a different configuration. So we updated over like 10 articles and created 2 new articles for this. Okay, so some frequently asked questions. Okay, scale out. This comes a lot, right, Howard? You probably heard it too in your end.
Yep.
So customers, there are like 2 types of customers. Some of them, they actually want to start small, and these are usually SMB, small, medium business customers. They don't know what to expect in HCI. They want to start small, but they're like, if I like it, I want to improve it. Add more nodes if needed, and which is perfectly fine. You can do that. Today, we have a manual process in 21H2, but in 22H2, we are making this automatic, meaning what happens today is when you add a node to a cluster, you can add the node, and now the node is part of the cluster, but the disks that come with it, let's say you had node 1 and you had like 5 disks, and now you're adding node 2 with another 5 disks. So those 5 disks are added to the pool as well. But it's you remember the resiliency that I talked about in here. I'm just going to jump here. This fault domain awareness default actually stays physical disk. It doesn't go to storage scale unit automatically. So that's what I mean here about like manual process. So you need to create a separate pool, and we all have this in our documentation. You create a separate pool with this storage scale unit as the fault domain awareness default, and then you need to move the VMs that you have on the old pool to the new pool and delete the old pool. But this is all going to be automatic in 22H2. But for this, before that, you have to do it manually. But it is possible to do that today. So this is what we talked about. Can I actually use a hybrid? Can I use capacity and cache together? No. It is a single tier and all flash, and for the reasons that we talked about. How can I update my single node cluster? This is a good question that we always get. So today, if you go to Windows Admin Center or from PowerShell, if you do a client aware updating, cow, you'll see that it's not a single node is not supported. So today, you can actually do it through Windows Admin Center again, but you go to Server Manager instead of Cluster Manager, and you update it from there. The other option is you can go to the sconfig of that server and install it. It's easy enough, and those are both supported. And we actually are going to support client cluster aware updating in 22H2 as well. So this is like, again, another question that we always get, and we kind of like talked about it. Yes, there's actually like a single node cluster. Some customers are like, I understand that, but I actually want to minimize downtime. So what we tell customers usually is that make sure that you have a component level resiliency, like mirrored disks, mirrored OS disks, mirrored data disks, teamed NICs. So that the components, if one component fails, you can actually keep on running. And of course, you need to have your backups and everything up to date. That's everyone should do that. Plus, like on top of that, if you still need more resiliency, you can actually use something like Azure Site Recovery. And of course, if your network is supporting it, that's another option as well. And for monitoring, and this is again, we talked about it. I think the most important thing is like for those like single node clusters, make sure that you have log analytics, make sure you have Azure monitors and insights configured, so that you can actually see all your single node clusters in one view in Azure portal and easily see if everything is healthy. So we added HCI catalog support, but there's also Sizer. And this is what we always get is like, can I use Sizer? We are working on it right now. We don't have the Sizer single node support in Sizer today, but I'm actively working on with the Sizer team to add that in the future. So,
Slavko, you have a question?
Yes, so I understand that Azure Stack HCI supports tiered storage, and we said that the traditional hard drives are not so important, so maybe SSDs and NVMe. And I also understand that single node does not support that. So I'm just wondering if you upgrade, if you add additional node to go from one node to two nodes, is this functionality then becomes available, or it's not available as in second bullet point?
That's a great question, Slavko. So if you go from single node to multi-node, then you can actually definitely have this, hybrid configuration. But I don't know, like if, because since you actually started with all flat configuration, I don't know if it's feasible for a customer to actually go ahead and add some hard drives or capacity drives and change that whole configuration back on both, because you need to have identical, hardware and disks on each node. So with one node in a different configuration, you have to actually add it to the first node as well. So I don't know the feasibility of it. I mean, technically it's possible, but like, I don't know, Howard, what do you think? Like, do you see that happening?
I see it a little bit differently, but we have done 2-node to 3-node expansion. We had to create another pool, move the VM, create another virtual disk. That's for existing environments. If you go from, let's say, a 4-drive NVMe to a 2-node hybrid, I could see me adding a JBOD to each node. Then those becomes cache and become a hybrid design if you want to do video storage. But no, I think it's possible, but I can't see the scenario that will drive this.
That's exactly my thinking too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So technically it's possible, but
technically
it's not probably very sensible to do. Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to go through nights of what I do and trying to make sure it works and I break it, and I could see some challenges there.
Yeah. Okay, so the deployments. So we added support for 21H2, so you can actually go ahead and download 21H2. And what you do is like you boot the system with that, and after that you can configure your IP address. By the way, I actually have a bunch of Azure VMs running this too. If you have nested virtualization VMs, you can easily test this. I have like a bunch of systems and it works perfectly fine. And one tip, what I do is I actually create an image, because I download the ISO like a VHD, right? And you can actually create an image in Azure with that VHD. And if you create an image, then you can right click that image and say create a new VM, which is like a really easy way to get HCI OS booted on Azure VM. So you can either do it on an Azure VM, or you could do it on a nested virtualization and you add Hyper-V, and then you can actually add the ISO and boot from there. So or VHD. So those are two options. If you don't have hardware, you can test this in both ways. And go through sconfig and IP address, enable RDP, all the good things you guys know already, probably, like you've done this multiple times. Add server to domain, make the domain user a local admin, and after that you install the required features, and you can take some of these out, but this is what I usually do. And after that, make sure that you have all the latest updates. You can go to sconfig, or like I mentioned, you can go to WAC, Windows Admin Center and Server Manager, and make sure you have all the updates, and then you need to reboot, create a vSwitch, create a cluster, and I usually do it with no storage, and then enable S2D. Of course, if you have disks, you may need to initialize before so that S2D can see it. And that's it. And then once you register your subscription, you can create VMs on it.
I have a question. It just came up just in my mind. Microsoft investing heavily into the Azure Stack HCI OS stack and keep on adding feature. Will single node support ever come down to Windows Server 22?
No. It's going to be exclusive to Azure Stack HCI.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are drawing in sand, aren't you?
Yeah. It's going to be exclusive feature, yeah. Okay. The other thing we are working on, which is reducing. We haven't announced this yet, but it will be announced. we are now because we are testing it right now. We are reducing the minimum number of disks, data disks to 2. So that's another thing we are working on, and that is going to be exclusive to HCI as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. Thank you. I'm sure we have other questions, but let's jump over to Henry. Henry, can you maybe share to the audience that this is actually real?
Yep, sure. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, probably more familiar, the over cluster manager roles have a whole bunch of VMs in here with that's on there, but one node, disk, single, I think I have 2 volumes, a collect volume, and then this. Networks is where it's kind of interesting, because then like my network 1 is just one adapter. And network 2 for cluster, that was also just a single adapter. So that's usually, something that you never see. If you only have one active adapter in a normal cluster, you're in trouble, right? But in this environment, that basically that's okay. So at the admin center view, then you see same thing as you would normally see. Everything is, just as what you would expect. And then like I create a Kubernetes cluster on there, and then you can see the Kubernetes configuration and the cluster inside of it. Have a GPU on that server as well, part of the GPU pool.
You have a lot of toy on this single node. Where'd you get all these toys?
Just ask. And from an Azure perspective, let's see here. I can do Azure Stack HCI, Azure Stack HCI, and then this is the Cooper Plus. So it's single node. It's connected to Azure Arc, and yeah.
Wow, real.
So, yeah, it's real, all this stuff. And then I think one other thing I was going to just show is, so this cluster with the 6330 CPU, 28 cores, it's got a lot of cores, ran VM Fleet. So you see just one node, 600,000 IOPS and read latency, less than a millisecond throughput. And so at the drive level, with Windows Admin Center, you can get the information per drive. You can see the throughput, the IOPS, and the latency at the drive level. So you can see that it's doing very well. And where normally is with a normal cluster with 2 nodes or more, your writes usually will have to be written at least one, two-way mirror. You have to write across, go through the network and to the other node to get your writes completed. This is basically a single node, so from a performance perspective, it does very well. To write the data. This is all local. So this is their 7030 set, 300,000 IOPS, and then probably the sequential from a bandwidth perspective, it's very well, and then even for 100 write, very low latency and very high throughput. So you're not getting less from a performance perspective because it's a one node. In some ways, you're getting a little more because your writes are local. But obviously, there's the thing you have to know. It's a one node, right? So But yeah, that's one of the wanted to share. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
All the questions in there, I can't see the question on the side, so I can't see all the questions, but can you see the questions, Henry? Maybe you could read them a little bit, see which one the question we need to answer.
Question from Ben.
Oh, Ben, okay. What was the question?
Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just asking because I think I heard earlier that the minimum drive quantity for single node HCI clusters would be reduced from 4 currently for multi-node clusters will be going down to 2. My question was, is that going to apply also with multi-node, or is that just for single node?
Sorry, I was mute. Good question. And just to clarify one more time, it's not official yet. So we haven't announced support yet. We are actually working on it though. And it is going to be for multi-node as well. So not just for single node.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie?
This is a hardball scenario. Like I'm just curious because I can see this being such a popular edge deployment scenario solution thing. Has there been any, and I know you're not gonna be able to answer this definitively, but has there been anyone that has asked about Azure Stack HCI builds on ARM architecture? And I'm saying that because when you start talking about smaller edge deployments, lower power, maybe you don't need a boatload of performance in the traditional sense from a compute perspective, but things like Kubernetes and those types of services really shine in that world. Is that something that's at least come up in conversation, or have you had people ask you that?
Not specifically. I mean, we heard about like lowering the minimum of like hardware minimums so that it's like as tiny as possible, and but not ARM specifically. Sam, did you hear? I have Sam, my manager, here too. Sorry to put you on the spot, but did you hear?
Yeah, no, I think we don't have any definitive plans on that right now. But what I will say is, one of the advantages of a product like Azure Stack HCI, which is essentially intended to bring learnings and technologies that we use in public Azure down to the edge through these products, right? And if you think about it from that lens, right, anything that we do with ARM support in a Azure data center, right, could potentially facilitate what you're describing here in the future, right? And so that, just as an example, right, there are other things that we are planning to do which already exist in public Azure that we are have already announced that we're bringing down to Azure Stack HCI, right? So I would kind of put it into that category. Obviously, there's no commitments of that happening definitively, but it's not out of the question because obviously it is something that we are doing already elsewhere, right? So.
Thank you very much.
Who here in the audience actually are thinking about single nodes, and what would be the use case scenario from your perspective?
If no one's going to speak, is someone hopping on? I was going to give an example, but
go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I come from a world in a previous life where we had a lot of, I'll just be honest, I worked for a hotel management company, and there were a dozen hotels that my parent company managed with a bunch of different brands and flags, whether it's Hilton, Holiday Inn, Radisson, and their parent companies. And again, thinking back 20 years ago to now, it's still a traditional, you drop a quarter height rack somewhere in a hotel back office that's already too tight to begin with a 2 or 4 U server, and it's like, good luck, here you go, and you just pray that the on-site folks can not spill a gallon of water on it during their lunch break. that was always a nightmare scenario for us that I feel like could, with modernization going on, where your line of business apps are being more cloud centric. So you're shifting to containers, you're shifting to more modern .NET architecture where things can be a little more modularized. Or maybe they're interfacing with things that are hosted in the cloud now. You not having a giant server and something like a single node. I don't know the footprint of your Kepler nodes, but something that is more akin to a tower, to use that term, or even if it was eventually, if a Nook-sized device became popular and certified, that is something, ruggedized devices. That's something where I can see those environments shining, just because there is no need for a 4U, 2U giant pizza box server in a hotel back office. And if any of you deal with retail or food and beverage in a bar or a club, that space is at a premium, electricity is at a premium. So that immediately came to mind. If I was in that world, this is the tree I would be barking up right now.
Good feedback. I saw a couple of notes. Chad, did you write something too?
Yeah, I was just responding to Chad. I think he was thinking about ASR scenario. I am not 100% sure about the ASR. It's single node is not doing anything specific to ASR, just like multi-node. I don't know if ASR works if the node is down. So if I need to guess, I think it should work because it's already replicated. So you just turning on the VM on the Azure side. But I can go and double check and come back. I'm not sure, Chad, to be honest. But single node is not doing anything specific to ASR. If the ASR supports this, then yes.
So what if the single node wasn't even online, or was still online, and you wanted to migrate stuff to Azure for a time period, for a maintenance period, and then, reboot the single node? Would that work?
Sure. You need to then fail over to
Azure,
to Azure, and then fail back.
And then fail.
I think that would be the scenario. Yes, it should work. Yeah.
And that scenario will be ASR already have RPO, RTO, storage already copy up there. You have a VM point there. But the challenge is, what is a VM? If it's a new VM, which is the Azure edition, then you can move up and down from Azure to your on-premise or Azure Stack HCI pretty easy. What happens with regular VM? How do you fail back and fail back? I thought the regular VM you can do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you need to install agent and replicate to cloud. So it's possible if you have on-premise Hyper-V, for example, and VM. But in advance, you need to install agent, register, set up the replication.
Okay.
Sorry.
You got to register it as an Azure. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
VM. Okay.
Kevin, you have a use case scenario with your environment. Is this going to be interesting for you guys?
Yeah, it might be. It's really going to depend on what the business wants with redundancy and resiliency, right? If today a lot of these our two-way radio networks have a lot of management consoles within their kind of regional networks. So, and they're all virtualized today, and they all are virtualized on single node chassis. So, yes, it's almost a perfect leap from one, dare I mention, hypervisor to a newer one that we love and want to move to. So it's all there, or that will work. It's just, I think the business probably needs to realize, hey, but with a 2-node, you can have that much more resiliency and redundancy. At still a fairly good cost, I think, and then back that up with ASR or whatever other kind of tools to the cloud, right? So, it's an option for sure. I think, Howard, if budgets are squeezed and whatever else, and it just makes sense that we can kind of leverage Azure as that backup for it. then we'll be good to go. So it's good to know that the option's there, just in case.
You may be the first one, Kevin.
Yeah, hey, you know how much we love that.
And I I have some customers also are thinking about like I dare to use the word hybrid, but like again like that kind of like, let's say like petrol stations, 500 petrol stations, maybe 300 of them is multi-node, or 200 of them are single node. Like it depends, right? Like if it's small, maybe it's not required. And also like if we can get to a hardware where it is like really small and no fan, that kind of a thing. If you can support something like that, then why not, right? If you can just mount it like to the wall or something like that.
Good point.
I see the scenario where the backup and restore type of scenario where you've got these small businesses that want this one single server in their business to do everything for them, and then also be able to have that backed up to the cloud. So if their site was to blow over by a storm, like they do in central Minnesota, they can still bring up their infrastructure in wherever Azure is at, and the ASR sounds like a real option there.
Yeah,
especially in a single node scenario, because then the single node cost is down. You don't have to buy the two nodes to do the resiliency there. Yeah.
Even those like FEMA deployments that you hear these horror stories about, after a hurricane or a tornado or something in the States, at least in the United States, we can, folks that are familiar with this, there are times where it's like we need infrastructure on the ground. I mean, I can come up with, AI and ML use cases for imaging drones flying overhead on a, over a disaster site. But you need, like, you have poor latency. You need that processing right there. You can't go up and down to the cloud, but they're cloud native services. Something like this is a lot easier to carry around than a 2, 3, 4 node S2D cluster or traditional Azure Stack HCI cluster.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Kerim, those are some of the feedbacks, and we are excited. We're excited as this is GA. Excited that now I could talk to all the customers about this solution. Hopefully, we'll get one deploy soon. Then we'll share with you the good, bad, and indifferent, because Microsoft is perfect, right? There's no bugs, nothing's wrong with it, everything's perfect. So but I'm sure very soon I will have a couple of those out in the field, and to make sure we learn from it.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate it. An hour, we're past the hour. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Feel free to email us. If you have any questions on single node, Kerim is your guy. Feel free to email him. We have his email address. He's very easily accessible. And thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you guys soon.